story begins with a boy named Angus, whose mother had sent him to swim in the sea, but instead, he decided to quietly sit by the shore and spend his time there. Suddenly, he noticed a large egg submerged in the water, so he took the egg out of the water. He was just examining it closely when his mother came over and told him to come back home. So Angus quickly hid the egg in his bucket and left with his mother, Annie. Annie was angry with him because not only did Angus not swim, he didn't even try to get into the water. You're completely dried up, and you never do what I tell you to. Don't do that. Anyway, Angus didn't say anything, and as soon as they reached home, he went straight into the workshop. Soon his sister Christy came back home and asked Annie what Angus had done at the sea today. So Annie told her too. What else? He just sat alone as always. Meanwhile, Angus was putting away his things in the workshop. This workshop actually used to belong to his father, Charlie. At this time, Charlie had joined the army and was fighting a war for his country. Remembering his father, Angus looked at his photo, and then he checked the calendar to see when Charlie would come back home. After that, he took out the egg he had found in the sea, washed it, and peeled off its outer layer. He was quite surprised to see its shiny blue color. Before the egg could break, Annie called out to him. He had to leave the egg there and run towards the house. That night, when it suddenly started raining heavily, Angus got scared that the egg might not be safe in the workshop. He immediately ran through the rain to the workshop, but the egg had already broken. He looked around to see what had come out of the egg, and he saw a strange creature. When he tried to get closer to the animal and touch it, the creature tried to bite him. That's when Angus realized that maybe it was hungry. So he quickly went to get something for it to eat, after which the creature calmed down a bit. Now, as Angus was feeding it gently, Annie started calling out to him again. After that, poor Angus had to go back and sleep, even though he didn't want to. The next morning, when Angus woke up, he saw that a group of soldiers had arrived at their house. He went to meet them with Annie and Christy, and that's when they met Captain Hamilton. Hamilton said that according to reports, enemy soldiers might try to infiltrate the country by sea. That's why his team of soldiers would stay at their house and prepare to face the enemy from there. After that, his soldiers started bringing in their equipment and setting up their workspace inside the house. Then Annie told Christy and Angus to go back to their room. Anyway, later Angus went to the library to see if he could find a book about that strange creature. As soon as he found the book, he went straight to the workshop. But everything was in chaos there, and the creature was trying to chew on Charlie's shoes. Angus realized that it was hungry, so he went to the kitchen to get some food. But there, the soldier's cook, Sergeant Strunk, stopped him and said he wasn't allowed to come in. Angus said he just needed a little food, but Strunk ignored him. Then Angus asked him if he could take out the kitchen trash. Hearing this, Strunk immediately agreed, and then Angus fed all the leftover food from the kitchen to his new friend. Watching him eat made Angus very happy, and he named the animal Crusoe. After that, he started reading about this animal, but he couldn't find much information. In no time, Crusoe finished all the food. Angus filled the trash can with water so that Crusoe could swim in it and have fun. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hamilton was preparing his men for an enemy attack. He wanted them to be ready to face an attack at any moment. Meanwhile, Angus left Crusoe alone in the workshop and came back so that Annie wouldn't get suspicious of him. But later, we see that a man named Lewis arrived in the town. Then he went to meet Annie, who was in the workshop at that time. He said that he wanted to work in this workshop. When the man asked for work, Annie told him that he would have to clean the entire workshop, so Lewis immediately got to work. During this, he also took out the trash can from the workshop, the same one in which Angus had hidden Crusoe. As soon as Angus saw this, he rushed to stop Lewis, but Crusoe was no longer there. Then Angus asked Lewis who he was and what he was doing in the workshop. Angus said that this was his father's workshop and that his father would be returning soon from the war. To this, Lewis replied, "Look, brother, your dad can do whatever he wants when he comes back, but until he returns, I'm the boss of this workshop." Hearing this, Angus walked out of there and started looking for Crusoe. We see that Crusoe had entered Angus's house, and as soon as he saw him, Strunk's dog Churchill started chasing after him. Luckily, Churchill was tied up with a chain, so he failed to pounce on and eat Crusoe. Meanwhile, Crusoe ran into the bathroom. Just then, when Christy entered the bathroom, she screamed loudly and ran to the stairs. Hearing her screams, Angus immediately understood that Christy had seen Crusoe. So he calmed Christy down and explained to her that Crusoe was his pet, who had hatched from an egg he found by the sea. But Christy was still badly frightened. However, Angus made her promise not to tell Annie, because Crusoe doesn't harm anyone. Meanwhile, on the other side, Annie came to the workshop to meet Lewis. She had brought some of her husband's clothes with her, which she gave to Lewis. Seeing this, Lewis asked if Charlie wasn't coming back. At this, Annie said with a heavy heart that he would never return. To this, Lewis said, "But Angus told me that his father is coming back from the war." Annie replied, "Angus is still a child." The truth was that Charlie had died because the ship sank in the sea. Anyway, then she asked Lewis to help fix the leak in the bathroom. When Lewis came into the house to fix it, we see that this was the same bathroom where Angus and Christy had hidden Crusoe. As soon as Lewis knocked on the door, they tried to stop him from coming in, but when they still didn't come out after quite a while, Lewis said he would complain about them to Annie. Finally, Christy was forced to open the door. Lewis recounted the entire captivating story from within the confines of the room. When Lewis, with a look of profound surprise etched across his face, cautiously extended his hand, attempting to make contact with him, Crusoe, with an unexpected and startling burst of aggression, suddenly lunged forward with a clear intention to bite him fiercely. Anyway, then Lewis said that Crusoe looks exactly like a seahorse. The seahorse is one of the rarest animals in the world. It is said that at any given time, there is only one seahorse on Earth. After a seahorse dies, a new egg hatches, from which a new seahorse will be born again. Then Lewis told them about the magical powers of the seahorse. But just then, Annie suddenly knocked on the door. Now Angus asked Lewis for help in hiding Crusoe, because Annie would never allow him to keep it in the house. After that, Lewis agreed to help him. Then, as soon as Annie came inside, she didn't see Crusoe, even though Crusoe was peeking out. But Lewis somehow managed to handle the situation. After this, Annie went outside and ran into Hamilton. He invited Annie to join the dinner being held for the soldiers. Later that night, Lewis told Angus that they should return Crusoe to the sea, because that's his real home, but Angus was absolutely not willing to do that. He said that Crusoe's real place is only with me. Soon, the dinner for the soldiers began at the house. At that time, Angus had to leave Crusoe in the bathroom to take care of something, and he accidentally forgot to close the door. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Crusoe escaped once again. Meanwhile, when Strunk's dog Churchill caught Crusoe's scent, he started searching for him like crazy. As soon as he spotted Crusoe, he began chasing him all over the house. During this chaos, they both jumped onto the dinner table and ruined the entire dinner. However, everyone else could only see Churchill. Poor Churchill is going to get a good scolding today. Meanwhile, Crusoe ran straight outside and jumped into the fountain, where he even found plenty of fish to eat. On the other side, Angus was searching everywhere for Crusoe. Just then, Louise told him to go back home, because Annie was quite upset about what had happened at the dining table. Louise assured him that he would find Crusoe and bring him back home safe and sound. Then Angus went back home, and after searching for a long time, Louise finally found Crusoe near the fountain. But now he had grown much bigger than before. Louise immediately called Angus over, and when Angus saw Crusoe, he too realized that it was now time to return Crusoe to the sea. Then they loaded Crusoe onto the back of the truck and set off towards the sea. Soon enough, they reached the seashore, and finally, they released Crusoe into the water. Parting with Crusoe made Angus very sad, but he really had no other choice. That's why he decided to let Crusoe go. Then, the next day, we see a man named Jimmy who went fishing in the sea with his friend Hugh. Suddenly, Hugh felt that a big fish had gotten caught in their line. But as soon as they pulled the line, their boat started sinking into the water. Just then, the massive Crusoe suddenly appeared before them, and seeing him left both of them stunned. But Hugh still wanted to catch this animal because by doing so, they could earn millions and become rich. Jimmy didn't agree with this, and meanwhile, Crusoe started dragging them farther away from the shore. Finally, Jimmy cut the line to save their lives, and then they saw Crusoe once again. They couldn't believe their eyes, because they had never seen such a strange creature, nor had they ever heard anything about it. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hamilton told Angus that his mother wanted him to start training for the army right away, after which Angus began helping the soldiers with their work. But within just a few days, he got bored of all this. One day, he slipped away from Captain Hamilton and ran toward the sea. He called out to Crusoe many times, but there was no sign of him anywhere. So he got into a boat and set out to look for him himself. After a short while, Crusoe emerged from the water in front of him, and Angus was amazed to see how big he had become. Then, he jumped up and sat on the back of his special friend. Even though he was quite scared, Crusoe took him on a ride across the sea, and he really enjoyed it. When Crusoe brought Angus back to the shore, Strunk's dog Churchill was also there at that time, and he caught Crusoe's scent. Strunk was there with Churchill as well, so when Churchill ran toward the shore, he also reached there. He had never seen such a strange and unusual animal like Crusoe before. He couldn't believe his eyes, no matter how hard he tried. That night, Angus told Christy and Lewis about his trip on the sea, and both of them were very happy to hear it. Meanwhile, Annie saw them laughing from outside and started to walk away. Just then, Lewis noticed her and followed after her. At that moment, Annie thanked Lewis, because today, thanks to him. She saw her children laugh wholeheartedly after such a long time. Lewis just laughed and brushed off her words. Meanwhile, on the other side, we see that Jimmy told a reporter named Jock about the strange creature he found in the sea. After hearing about it, Jock thought that he could use this to bring investors to the town, since tourists would be interested in seeing such a unique animal. But Hugh said that the town is fine just the way it is. But Jock argued that if there's a dangerous creature in the sea, the public has a right to know about it. They have every right to know. Meanwhile, the next day, Hamilton took Annie and her children to the top of a hill so he could show them his army's preparations. He wanted to show them samples of the weapons that would be used against the enemies. Now the captain asked his men to demonstrate an attack on enemies hidden in the water. Hearing this, Angus realized that this could put Crusoe's life in danger, so he pleaded with Annie to stop the soldiers. Annie couldn't understand what he was saying and told Angus to stand quietly. Then Christie told Annie that Angus was telling the truth, but Annie didn't listen to her either. Meanwhile, the soldiers began their attack in the water, and on the other side, Crusoe was terribly frightened. He was struggling hard to escape these deadly attacks. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Jock had specifically come to the seashore today with the intention of taking a picture of Crusoe, but despite their efforts, they couldn't catch even a glimpse of him. So, they ingeniously made a fake model of Crusoe and then carefully took a picture of it at the seashore. Then Frank and some of the other soldiers decided to join forces and find Crusoe. That night, Christie went to Angus's room, and then the two of them ran away from home with Lewis so they could check if Crusoe was safe and sound. As soon as they reached the seashore, Angus called out to Crusoe. At first, Crusoe didn't come out, but when he did, he had become wild and uncontrollable. He didn't even recognize Angus and tried to attack him. Seeing this, Angus and Lewis were shocked because they couldn't understand what was happening. Soon, Crusoe went back into the water, and then Angus blamed Lewis for all of this because it was on his suggestion that they had released Crusoe into the sea. Meanwhile, Strunk and his fellow soldiers were searching for Crusoe in their boat. Today, they had come with the intention of killing Crusoe. As soon as they got close to the shore, they heard Churchill barking. Strunk realized that Churchill must have seen something. That's why he ordered the boat to be taken in the direction of the sound. But then, suddenly, Crusoe devoured Churchill alive, and once again, everything became quiet all around. The soldiers couldn't understand what was happening and started firing in that direction. But then, suddenly, Crusoe rammed their boat, knocking all of them into the water. Meanwhile, when Hamilton heard about the gunfire at sea, he thought that the enemy had attacked them. He immediately ordered all the soldiers to launch a counterattack on the enemies. Then he told Annie to hide in the house with the children. Just then, Annie saw Christie and asked her where Angus was. Christie said that he wasn't in the house. Hearing this, Annie became quite anxious and said that she couldn't just leave Angus alone in such a warlike situation. That's why, insisting, she set out towards the sea with Hamilton. Hamilton tried hard to convince her, but Annie simply wouldn't agree, so he had to take Annie along with him. Meanwhile, out at sea, Crusoe had become completely uncontrollable and had grabbed Strunk in his mouth. Just then, Angus arrived at the last moment and tried to stop Crusoe, but Crusoe didn't listen to him at all. Now, to get closer to him, Angus got into the water, but suddenly his foot slipped and he started drowning. Seeing this, Crusoe let go of Strunk and came to save Angus's life. He immediately brought Angus to the shore, but now Angus had lost consciousness. Lewis and Crusoe tried very hard to revive him, but there was no movement in his body. Anyway, they didn't give up hope, and finally Angus regained consciousness. Now, seeing Crusoe back to his old self, he was extremely happy. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton received word that they hadn't found any trace of the enemy boats. But even so, he ordered the soldiers to keep attacking in the water. Soon, he too reached the seashore. But at that very moment, Crusoe hid in the water again. Annie ran to her son Angus, and she was overjoyed to see him safe and sound. Angus tried to explain everything to her about Crusoe, but now Annie was angry, and she told Angus to come out of his imaginary world. But just then, Crusoe came out of the water, and finally Annie realized that Angus had been telling the truth all along. Hamilton was also left stunned at the sight of such a gigantic creature. But then, suddenly, on Hamilton's orders, the soldiers began attacking in the water. So Angus climbed onto Crusoe's back so he could guide him away from the soldiers. Seeing this, Annie became terribly frightened and told Hamilton to stop the attack immediately. Hamilton tried to communicate with his soldiers, but the radios had stopped working. Now Hamilton, Lewis, and Annie all got into a boat and followed Angus themselves. Meanwhile, with Angus's help, Crusoe was avoiding the soldiers' attack. But just as he was about to get out of their reach, the soldiers released the net they had set in the water for enemies. Unfortunately, Crusoe couldn't get past the net in time. Meanwhile, Hamilton's boat reached Crusoe, and Lewis told Angus to jump into the boat. Then, before parting from Crusoe, Angus said that he was his best friend and that he would always remember him. After that, he jumped into the water and climbed back into the boat. Meanwhile, Crusoe dove into the water and, with an incredible leap, went straight over the net. Seeing this, Angus and his other friends burst with joy, because now Crusoe was safe, away from